More now on our top story, the Sydney siege inquest findings. Fraser Duff is a former police and military tactical operator and is a contributor to Australian Security magazine. He's been following the events during and post the Lindt Cafe siege and joins me now in the studio. Thank you very much for coming in this evening.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Now, of course, with the benefit of hindsight, as the coroner outlined today, things should have been done differently. What do you make of the recommendations that were made today?
Well, I have to say they're obviously substantial, and I only downloaded a copy of the report late this afternoon, and the copy I had was 500 pages, so it's obviously a very extensive coronial inquest, and no doubt there's lots of findings and lots of things that we can take away from this. And I probably was reflecting a little bit on the words of one of the victims of the crime, Louisa Hope, when she said probably one of the important things we need to do is really critically analyse our institutions and government and not see that as a form of criticism but see it as an opportunity to learn.
And tell me, did any of the recommendations jump out at you? Did they stand out?
Well, I think having followed it relatively closely and thought deeply about it, I think the recommendations that I were looking for really related to the involvement of the ADF. And that seemed to, or appeared to be a little bit light on in terms of the coroner stating that they couldn't and shouldn't have actually been involved. But I think as late as a few minutes ago there's been talk federally about the future involvement of ADF in terrorist-related incidents. And whilst that's complex and there's constitutional issues around that, I think that going forward will be probably an important avenue for society, for the Australian society, and for intervention at this level next time.
Well, as we talk this evening, almost 4,000 soldiers are preparing to take up new posts across the United Kingdom in the wake of the Manchester terrorist attack. Can you see a time where the military are going to be actively stationed on Australian streets?
Well, it really comes down to, I suppose, the Australian culture, and we're very different from England, Europe, and other places that have adopted an approach where the military work hand in hand on the street with tactical law enforcement officers. But I think it also is a question of, are we really ready for that? And in a way, since 2011, I should say since September 11, 2001, the threat environment has changed and situations have changed, and perhaps we've been caught sleeping somewhat in terms of our approach to dealing with terrorist-related incidents. From a personal perspective, I would like to see more involvement, only because they have such an outstanding capability and they're so well resourced, practiced and rehearsed, and I think they could contribute enormously to the safety and well-being of the Australian public. And, if that's possible going forward, then that's something I think that would benefit us all.
What do you think it says to, indeed, what the public would support and expect in terms of future hostage situations and the level of force that could be employed? Do you think the Sydney siege has shown that the public expects that police and possibly in the future military would actually go in much earlier and potentially with lethal force, something that we haven't seen here in Australia?
It's an interesting point, and I think the thing about that is this was a catalyst event. Prior to this event, nothing would change. I think it really has taken this event and most notably the coronial inquest to probably release as extensive of findings as what it has. I tend to think the Australian culture may not have actually wanted a heavy police intervention, and I think in an article that I wrote, Damned If You Do and Damned If You Don't, regardless of the action that the police may have taken on that fateful night, if they had have gone in early and killed Man Monis, then there would have been quite a lot of rebuttal in society and politically, and there would have been police tribunals into the shootings, and it would have been obviously quite substantial as well. The unfortunate thing is we have two innocent hostages that were killed here, and I think that has left a very sour taste, and it's very devastating for the Australian public, and I think that is the catalyst for change. And I think people realise now that they probably want better protection from their law enforcement agencies and better capability.
But even if the substance of the coroner's recommendations from today had been implemented ahead of the Sydney siege, is it certain that the outcome would have been any different?
Nothing certain about outcomes in volatile situations like that. These incidents are extremely dynamic, highly stressful, and what occurred was a tragedy. To say could that have been averted? It's quite possible it could have with a different level of intervention, but it would have been quite a substantial amount of violence, and the question is always whether the Australian public are prepared for their law enforcement or their military to actually execute that. I think they're more than capable of doing that, but you know, that moves us to another level in terms of how we like to operate as a society and whether we're prepared for those agencies to do that for us.
This conversation has a ways to go, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Fraser Duff, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.